What would you do if one bad day cost you everything you'd worked for? Danielle Brooks, a brilliant black operations manager, brought her 8-year-old son to work during an emergency and was fired on the spot by her icy boss Miranda. No warning, no discussion. Cashes have consequences, Miranda had said coldly. But what if the real consequences were yet to come? And what happens when the person you once dismissed not as an employee, but as a leader? Stay tuned. This story will have you on the edge of your seat. You won't believe the twists that follow. Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now. Subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published news stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Danielle Brooks checked her reflection in the gleaming glass doors of Harrow & Layton Consulting. Her crisp navy suit was immaculate, her dark curls pinned neatly. Behind her, 8-year-old Jordan shifted nervously, clutching his backpack. Danielle crouched beside him. "Remember, baby, it's just—" "I'll be good, Mama." Danielle straightened, squared her shoulders, and swiped her keycard. The lobby buzzed with early morning energy. Heels clicked, voices murmured, and the scent of roasted coffee lingered. She led Jordan briskly through the glass partitions to her office on the 5th floor. A seasoned operations manager at Harrow & Layton for 7 years, Danielle had never once missed a deadline, fumbled a report, or been late. But life was life. Her usual sitter was hospitalized unexpectedly. A flurry of calls the night before yielded no alternatives. No family nearby, no friends who could watch Jordan at the crack of dawn. She'd emailed HR and left a voicemail with her boss, Miranda Wexler. Miranda never responded. Now, with Jordan settled in a chair and earbuds in, Danielle powered up her laptop and dove into her morning prep. At 9 o'clock sharp, Miranda's heels echoed down the corridor. Her voice rang clear, as always. "Morning." Danielle winced. She could already sense trouble. Moments later, Miranda appeared in the doorway, sleek in an ivory pantsuit. Her icy blue eyes landed on Jordan. "What's this?" she asked, her tone laced with disbelief. Danielle rose calmly. "Good morning, Miranda. My sitter had an emergency last night. I didn't want to disrupt today's quarterly reviews, so I brought my son just for today. He'll stay quietly in my office." Miranda's expression didn't soften. If anything, her perfectly arched brow rose higher. "That's highly inappropriate, Danielle. This is a professional environment. We don't bring children here. What if clients stop by?" Danielle's heart thudded. She had prepared for this. "I've cleared my calendar of client-facing meetings. I'll make sure Jordan stays invisible. This is temporary." Miranda crossed her arms. "It sets a poor precedent. This firm upholds standards, Danielle. Personal problems shouldn't bleed into work." Several nearby colleagues pretended not to eavesdrop, but Danielle could feel their eyes on her. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her tone level. "I understand, Miranda. I assure you this won't interfere with my responsibilities today." But Miranda wasn't interested in assurances. "I need to consult with HR. Wait here." She spun on her heel and stalked off. The morning dragged. Danielle worked efficiently, eyes darting to the corridor every few minutes. Jordan, true to his word, remained quiet, absorbed in a math app, but tension curled tighter in her chest with each passing hour. At noon, the email arrived. From HR. Subject: immediate termination of employment. Danielle stared at the words in disbelief. Terminated for bringing her son during an emergency. 7 years of service wiped away. Her throat closed. Jordan tugged her sleeve. "Mama, what's wrong?" She swallowed the lump and managed a thin smile. "We're going home, sweetheart." Word traveled fast in the office. As Danielle packed her belongings into a cardboard box, co-workers glanced at her with varying shades of pity, guilt, or indifference. No one spoke. Miranda appeared once more, arms folded. "You should have known better, Danielle. Actions have consequences." Danielle met her gaze. Calmly, quietly, they do. She led Jordan out with her chin high, but inside her heart ached. 7 years, dedication, hard work, gone just like that. Outside the building, Jordan looked up at her, worried. "Are you okay, Mama?" She crouched to hug him. "I will be, baby, I promise." In the distance, the towering facade of Harrow & Layton gleamed in the afternoon sun. Danielle looked back at it one last time, then turned away. What she didn't know, couldn't know yet, was that her story wasn't over. Not by far. The next morning, Danielle sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Sunlight streamed through the window, but it didn't touch the heaviness in her chest. Across the table, Jordan munched cereal, occasionally glancing at her with big, worried eyes. "Mama?" he asked quietly. "You're not going back to work?" Danielle mustered a smile. "Not to that place, baby, but don't you worry, Mama's going to figure something out." He nodded solemnly. After dropping him off at his summer program, Danielle returned home, fired up her laptop, and began updating her resume. Every word felt like a bitter reminder. She'd poured herself into that job. Streamlined systems, trained new hires, managed tense deadlines without a single complaint. And now? Out the door over a single emergency. No warning, no conversation, just cold dismissal. She sent out applications to every consulting firm she could find. The job boards blurred before her tired eyes. Still, she pushed on. Late that afternoon, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Mason Brooks, this is Thomas Ellison, newly appointed regional director. An industry veteran, known for shaking up corporate cultures wherever he landed. Danielle had read the internal memo about him just weeks ago, but she'd never met him. He'd only just started and was touring the different branches. "Yes, Mr. Ellison, how can I help you?" she replied carefully. There was a pause. His tone was warm but firm. "I'd heard about what happened yesterday. I'd like to hear it from you directly, if you don't mind." Danielle's breath caught. Word had traveled that far already? "Of course," she said. "It won't take long." She laid it out, factual, no bitterness, emergency situation, no childcare, no client meetings impacted, immediate termination. When she finished, silence stretched for a beat. "I appreciate your honesty," Ellison finally said, "and I'm sorry you were put in that position. That's not how we should treat dedicated employees." Danielle blinked, unsure how to respond. He continued, "I'd like to meet you in person, tomorrow morning if you're available." She swallowed her surprise. "Yes, I can do that." "Good. Come by my temporary office downtown. I'll have my assistant email you the details." The line disconnected. Danielle sat frozen for a moment, the phone still in her hand. After the cold dismissal from Miranda, this sudden glimmer of possibility felt almost unreal. But she knew better than to get her hopes too high, not yet. That night, after Jordan was asleep, she ironed her best blazer and polished her low heels. If this were her one shot at a new beginning, she would be ready. The next morning, nerves fluttered in her stomach as she arrived at the sleek glass tower downtown. The receptionist greeted her warmly and directed her to the 14th floor. When she stepped into the corner office, Thomas Ellison stood to greet her, a tall black man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and an easy but commanding presence. He offered a firm handshake. "Miss Brooks, thank you for coming." "Thank you for having me, Mr. Ellison." He gestured for her to sit. "Call me Thomas. Now, tell me a bit about your work at Harrow and Leighton." Danielle spoke clearly, outlining her years of contributions, the complex systems she'd improved, the mentorship she'd provided to junior staff, the extra hours, the unseen labor, all of it. Thomas listened intently, nodding. When she finished, he leaned back and studied her for a long moment. "You know," he said quietly, "when I was 8, my mother worked in a big accounting firm. One summer, her sitter bailed. No one to watch me. She had no choice." He smiled faintly. "An executive saw me sitting quietly with my books and chewed me out in front of everyone. Told her she was unprofessional. She almost lost her job. That day stuck with me." The room seemed to hum with energy. "That's why," Thomas continued, "when I heard about your situation, I knew I needed to speak with you myself." Danielle felt her throat tighten. For the first time since that awful email, she sensed someone truly understood. He gave a thoughtful nod. "Your reputation is strong. I've already spoken with a few people. Your work ethic speaks for itself." Danielle caught her breath. "So, here's what I propose," Thomas said. "We're expanding operations in this region. I need experienced managers who know the terrain. If you're interested, I'd like to bring you onto my new leadership team." For a moment, Danielle was too stunned to speak. I would be honored, Mr. Thomas, truly." He smiled. Good. HR will contact you with an offer and details. I look forward to working with you, Danielle. As she stepped out into the bright hallway, head high, something inside her shifted. This wasn't just a second chance. This was vindication. And Miranda Wexler? She hadn't seen the last of Danielle Brooks. Danielle stood in her small kitchen, staring at the printed offer letter Thomas Ellison's team had emailed that morning. Senior Operations Manager. Full benefits. Better pay than she'd earned at Harrow and Leighton. Flexibility for parental responsibilities. Room for advancement. And a handwritten note from Thomas attached. Looking forward to what we'll build together. She exhaled slowly, the weight in her chest lifting little by little. Thornton burst into the room, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mama, are you going back to work?" Danielle grinned and scooped him into a hug. "Yes, baby, and this time it's going to be even better." The next few days were a whirlwind. Paperwork, onboarding, and orientation at the new downtown office. Danielle soaked it all in. The new firm, Ellison and Grant Consulting, had a different feel altogether. The energy wasn't icy, and the people weren't coldly efficient drones. There was laughter in the break room. Employees brought their whole selves to work, and it showed. Danielle's first meeting with her new team confirmed it. Thomas gathered a small group of senior staff. "We're here to build not just a business," he said, "but a culture. One where people, all people, can thrive." Danielle glanced around the table. The group was diverse: black, white, Asian, Latino, younger professionals, seasoned veterans. Everyone engaged. Everyone listened. In her gut, Danielle knew this was going to be different. She dove into her new role with determination. Within weeks, she'd already flagged inefficiencies in client reporting and proposed better workflow systems. Her ideas weren't brushed aside. Either way, they were welcome, implemented, praised. One afternoon, Thomas stopped by her office, smiling. "Already making waves, I see," he said. "How's it feeling so far?" Danielle leaned back, smiling softly. "Honestly, like I can finally breathe." "Thomas, that's what I want for my team. Keep going. You've only just started." By the end of her first month, she'd organized a department-wide training session to share her project management techniques. Afterward, several colleagues approached her, thanking her for the insights. But word traveled fast in the corporate world. An old contact, Renee, one of the few friendly faces from Harrow and Leighton, texted Danielle late one evening. "Renee, girl, just heard Miranda's in a mood. Rumors flying. Big leadership meeting coming. Might be some changes." Danielle raised an eyebrow. Couldn't happen to a more deserving person, she thought wryly. A few days later, she crossed paths with Renee at a downtown networking mixer. They caught up over coffee. "You wouldn't believe the atmosphere over there now," Renee said, shaking her head. "After what happened with you and other folks hearing about it. People are tense. HR's reviewing leadership conduct. Some execs are nervous. And Thomas? His name's gold right now. People respect him. Everyone's watching his new team." Danielle blinked. "Watching me?" "Oh yeah, your story's making the rounds. People admire how you handled it. Word is your new department's already outperforming expectations." "And Miranda? She knows it, but she didn't think her decision would backfire like this." Danielle sipped her coffee, heart racing. She hadn't set out for revenge. All she wanted was dignity, a fair shot. But knowing that her integrity and her work were speaking louder than Miranda's arrogance, that was more satisfying than she'd imagined. Later that week, Thomas called her into his office again. "Danielle," he said, "you're doing excellent work. There's something I want you to consider." She listened intently. "Harrow and Leighton's leadership is shifting," Thomas said carefully. "They're seeking outside consultants to help reorganize operations and rebuild trust internally, and they reached out to us." Danielle's pulse quickened. "I won't force this," Thomas said, "but if you're willing, I'd like you to lead that consulting team. You know the company, the culture, the players, and frankly, you have the credibility." Danielle sat back, stunned. Going back, not as a subordinate, but as a consultant, leading change. I need to think about that," she said softly. Thomas nodded. "Of course, take your time, but remember, sometimes the best way to write a new chapter is to show them exactly who you are now." That night Danielle lay awake, mind spinning. She thought of Miranda's icy glare, of that humiliating final day, of the years she'd given to a company that discarded her so easily. And then she thought of Jordan, of the example she wanted to set for him, of resilience, of standing tall. In the morning she called Thomas. "I'm in," she said simply. "Good," he replied. "Let's show them how it's done." Danielle arrived early for the first strategy meeting on the Harrow and Layton project. The conference room at Ellison. Now she was returning not as an employee, but as the lead consultant on a contract her former boss would have to answer to. One by one, the rest of the project team filed in through sharp consultants Thomas had personally selected to back her up. They greeted her with warmth and respect. Danielle wasted no time laying out the plan. "We know the problem," she began. "Toxic leadership, employee dissatisfaction, high turnover. What we're going to do is map out the root causes, present actionable changes, and hold leadership accountable for following through. This is more than optics. It has to stick." They nodded, taking notes. No skepticism, no condescension, no dismissive glances. Danielle had earned her seat at the head of this table. Later that day, Thomas met with her privately. "There's one more thing," he said. "Harrow and Layton's leadership team will be present for the kickoff meeting next week, including Miranda. If you want me to assign someone else to lead that session, I'll understand." Danielle paused. Her stomach tensed at the thought of facing Miranda again. But then she pictured Jordan's little face, remembered the resolve she'd found. "No," she said. "I'll lead it. It's time." When the day arrived, Danielle chose her outfit carefully, a deep plum suit that flattered her skin tone and commanded presence. Her heels clicked confidently across the marble floors of Harrow and Layton's headquarters as she and her team entered the building. The same receptionist who'd watched her leave in disgrace a month earlier now greeted her with wide eyes. Danielle smiled politely, head held high. In the executive boardroom, the tension was palpable. Harrow and Layton's leadership team sat in a row, trying to project calm. Miranda, in her trademark ivory suit, sat front and center. When Danielle walked in, Miranda's eyes widened slightly just for a second, then narrowed. Danielle greeted the room with poised professionalism. "Good morning. I'm Danielle Brooks, Senior Operations Consultant with Ellison & Grant. Today we begin Phase 1 of your organizational review." Her voice was steady, her posture commanding, not a trace of the uncertainty she'd felt the day she was fired. Miranda crossed her arms but said nothing. Danielle clicked through her presentation data on employee satisfaction trends, leadership surveys, performance metrics. The facts spoke loudly. Under the current leadership, morale had dropped 35%, turnover had spiked, and client satisfaction was slipping. She paused, meeting each executive's gaze in turn. "The issues here are not with market conditions or external pressures," she said clearly. "They are internal, rooted in leadership practices, culture, and policies that undervalue talent and create fear-based compliance instead of engagement." A murmur rippled through the room. Some executives shifted uncomfortably. Danielle continued. "Our goal is to help rebuild trust. That starts with transparency, accountability, and real change, not lip service." Her team distributed a proposed roadmap for change. When the session ended, most executives filed out quickly, murmuring to each other. Only Miranda lingered. She approached Danielle slowly. "Well," she said coolly, "you certainly seem determined." Danielle met her gaze evenly. "I am. And this company needs more than determination. It needs integrity." For a moment, Miranda said nothing. Then her lips curled in a thin, forced smile. "We'll see how long you last this time." Danielle's voice stayed calm. "I lasted 7 years doing good work under bad leadership. Imagine what I can do with the right leadership behind me." With that, she turned and walked out, her team following. The elevator ride down was quiet, but when they reached the lobby, one of her consultants grinned. "That," he said, "was masterful." Danielle allowed herself a small smile. The real work was only beginning, but she had reclaimed her power. That night, as she tucked Jordan into bed, he looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "You're happy, Mama," he said softly. "I can tell." Danielle kissed his forehead. "I am, baby, and you know what? I'm proud, too." Because she knew this time she wasn't going to be dismissed or silenced. She was going to lead, and they were going to see it. The following weeks at Harrow and Leighton were a whirlwind. Danielle and her consulting team worked with precision, conducting anonymous employee surveys, leading focus groups, analyzing performance data, and mapping systemic issues. The findings were clear and damning. Employees across multiple departments described a culture of fear, micromanagement, and favoritism. Over half of those surveyed said they had no trust in senior leadership. Through it all, Danielle led with quiet authority. Gone was the woman who had once hesitated in Miranda's shadow. Now she sat at the head of every table, her voice calm, her insights sharp. Her reputation began to spread. Junior employees who had barely spoken to her during her years at Harrow and Leighton now greeted her with warmth, even gratitude. Some stopped her in the hallways. "Thank you for coming back," one whispered. "We didn't think anyone would stand up to them." "You're saying what we've wanted to say for years," another confided. Danielle nodded each time. She wasn't here for praise, but knowing her presence mattered, that fueled her even more. Meanwhile, Miranda grew increasingly tense. Though she tried to maintain her icy composure in public meetings, Danielle could see the cracks forming. In one closed-door session with the executive team, Miranda finally snapped. "This is getting out of hand," she said sharply. "We are a respected firm with long-standing practices. We don't need outsiders coming in here stirring dissent." Thomas, who attended that meeting as a senior partner on the project, leaned forward. His tone was calm but firm. "What you need," he said, "is to listen to your employees. You can either evolve or be left behind." The room was silent. Even Miranda couldn't argue with that. "You're doing exactly what this place needs," he told her. "But stay sharp. Change brings resistance, and some people," his eyes flicked toward the corridor Miranda had just stalked down, "fight hardest when they feel exposed." Danielle nodded. "I'm ready." As weeks turned into a month, the momentum built. The consulting team drafted a full report with a detailed action plan, leadership coaching, accountability metrics, restructuring recommendations. Word of Danielle's leadership spread beyond Harrow and Leighton's walls. Other firms took notice. Former colleagues from across the city reached out, some offering congratulations, others inquiring about future opportunities. And inside Harrow and Leighton, employees began to hope. The air felt different, conversations were less guarded, people stood a little taller. Then came the day of the formal presentation, the delivery of the consulting team's findings and recommendations to the entire leadership body, including board members. Danielle stood at the podium, poised and steady. "Our goal today," she began, "is not to assign blame but to lay a foundation for a healthy, more effective organization." She outlined the patterns her team had uncovered. Quoting survey results, she didn't shy away from uncomfortable truths. That leadership practices had created a climate of distrust, that talent was being driven away, that employees craved transparency, respect, and room to grow. Finally, she presented the path forward. "It will take courage," Danielle said. "It will take humility." And when she finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then a ripple of applause. Some board members nodded approvingly. Several executives murmured in agreement. Even those who'd been skeptical looked thoughtful. And Miranda? She sat rigid, her jaw tight, eyes glittering with restrained anger, but for once she said nothing. No smug retorts, no icy dismissal, because she knew the tide was turning and she wasn't in control of it anymore. After the meeting, as Danielle gathered her notes, a board member approached her. "That was one of the most honest and professional presentations we've had in years," he said. "You've given us a lot to think about." Danielle thanked him. Later that evening, she called Thomas to debrief. "You were outstanding today," he said. "You've set the tone for what comes next." Danielle smiled quietly, but inside she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because while the organization was beginning to shift, Miranda wasn't done fighting yet. And Danielle? She was more ready than ever to stand her ground. In the days following the major presentation, a current of cautious optimism ran through the halls of Harrow and Leighton. Employees whispered in break rooms and exchanged hopeful looks in elevators. It was as if Danielle's words had opened a window that had been shut for far too long. But not everyone welcomed the fresh air. Miranda Wexler had grown colder, more brittle. She stopped attending leadership workshops, skipped team-building sessions that were now mandatory, and, in executive circles, she began a campaign of quiet resistance. Danielle wasn't blind to it. Reports filtered back from sympathetic contacts in the company. Miranda downplaying the findings, undermining recommendations, questioning Danielle's credibility behind closed doors. "She's saying you only came back because you were bitter about getting fired," Renee told her over coffee one afternoon, trying to paint this like some kind of personal vendetta. Danielle sighed. "I should have expected that." Renee leaned forward. "Thing is, no one's buying it. People saw how you handled yourself. They know what happened." But Miranda wasn't content to stop there. Late one evening, Danielle received an unexpected email, an anonymous tip forwarded by a friend in HR. Attached were excerpts from her old personnel file at Harrow and Leighton, selectively edited to imply minor performance concerns that had never actually been part of her record. It was an obvious attempt to tarnish her reputation, though sloppily done. Danielle stared at the screen, anger tightening in her chest. She considered her options carefully. Reacting rashly would only give Miranda ammunition. No, she would stay professional, strategic. The next morning, Danielle scheduled a private meeting with Thomas. She laid out the situation clearly, showing him the forwarded message and explaining Miranda's recent behavior. Thomas read everything in silence, then leaned back in his chair. His face was calm, but his eyes had hardened. "That woman," he said quietly, "but she's not going to derail this." He looked Danielle in the eye. "You've handled this with more grace than most would. You've kept your focus on the work. That's exactly what we need to do now. Stay the course." Danielle nodded. "I'm not backing down." Together they crafted a plan. Over the next several weeks, Danielle and her team doubled down, not just presenting recommendations, but actively helping departments implement them. They led new leadership training modules, created mentoring programs, and set up transparent feedback channels. Danielle remained visible, approachable to staff, firm with leadership, unwavering in her message. Change is not optional, it's necessary. Gradually, employees began to speak up in ways they never had before. One by one, managers who had long been silent started to voice agreement with the reforms. New voices joined the leadership discussions, diversifying perspectives in rooms that had once been closed and homogeneous. And through it all, Danielle kept her composure, even as Miranda's hostility escalated in subtle ways. Pointed glances during meetings, dismissive comments at networking events. But where once those tactics might have rattled Danielle, now they only strengthened her resolve. She had earned her place, she had earned respect, and no amount of backroom scheming could take that away. One late afternoon, as she packed up for the day, her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. "Boyd wants to meet with you privately. They're impressed. We'll brief you tomorrow." Danielle read it twice, her heart quickening. Another door was opening, another step forward. She glanced at the framed photo of Jordan on her desk. She was leading, and they were watching. The private board meeting was set for Thursday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Danielle prepared meticulously. She reviewed her data, fine-tuned her talking points, and rehearsed responses to potential pushback. This was no ordinary check-in. This was a moment that could shape her entire trajectory. When the morning arrived, she dressed with intent. A deep charcoal suit, crisp white blouse, and her favorite gold earring. Professional, polished command. She arrived at Harrow and Leighton's executive boardroom 10 minutes early, calm but alert. Inside, the atmosphere was formal. The board members, mostly older white men in tailored suits, sat at the long table with notepads and digital tablets before them. A few nodded politely as Danielle entered. Thomas sat near the center, offering a small, encouraging nod. Miranda was there too, perched near the far end of the table. She didn't look up as Danielle entered, her lips pressed into a thin line. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Robert Langston, called the meeting to order. Ms. Brooks, he began, we've reviewed your team's progress reports. The changes underway are promising, but we'd like to hear directly from you about your vision for the firm's future. Danielle rose smoothly. Thank you, Mr. Langston, and thank you to the board for this opportunity. She spoke clearly, pacing her words with practiced ease. She outlined the concrete progress already made. Improved employee engagement scores, a measurable drop in turnover, and emerging leadership from within previously sidelined talent pools. This is just the beginning, Danielle said firmly. Sustainable change requires more than programs. It requires accountability from the top, ongoing transparency, and a true commitment to equity and inclusion. The culture must evolve. She glanced around the room, making deliberate eye contact with each board member. And, with respect, change also requires that those resistant to progress do not obstruct it. A ripple of acknowledgement passed among the board members. Several exchanged looks. At the far end of the table, Miranda shifted in her chair, her eyes locked on Danielle's. When the presentation ended, Langston nodded approvingly. Ms. Brooks, your leadership here has been exemplary, he said. We value your insight and your courage. We'll be discussing next steps internally. Thomas added, I'd like to recommend Danielle for an ongoing advisory role with the board as we move forward. A few murmurs of agreement followed. Even some who had been neutral at first were now visibly impressed. But then Miranda spoke. With all due respect, she said, her tone dripping with faux civility, I question whether it's appropriate to grant such influence to someone who only recently left the firm under controversial circumstances. The room tensed. Several board members frowned. Before anyone else could respond, Danielle stood her ground. All due respect, Ms. Wexler, she said evenly. I didn't leave. I was dismissed, without cause, during an emergency involving my son. And since that day, the very leadership that made that decision has been under review, because it reflected a larger cultural problem. She let that sink in. And yet, here I am, because progress matters more than personal grievance. I am here because this organization can be better. Silence. Then Langston spoke. Point well taken, Ms. Brooks. He turned to the rest of the board. We'll discuss the advisory role recommendation and provide an update at our next session. Danielle gathered her materials and exited the room with quiet confidence. In the hallway, Thomas caught up to her. Well done, he said. That wasn't easy. Danielle exhaled. But necessary. He nodded. Be ready. Change is coming, and I think you're going to be part of shaping it. Later that evening, as Danielle prepared dinner, her phone buzzed with another message from Thomas. Her board leaning strongly in your favor. Final decision next week. Stay the course. Danielle set the phone down and smiled softly. She wasn't just back in the game anymore. She was changing it. The following week was a slow burn. Danielle returned to her consulting work at Harrow and Leighton with deliberate focus, knowing the board's decision was pending. Word of the private meeting had spread through the office grapevine. Now employees watched her movements with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. Some, emboldened by her visible strength, began to speak more openly during workshops and department meetings. Danielle noticed a distinct shift in tone. Where once there had been hesitation, now there was engagement. People were tired of the old ways. They wanted the change she promised. Miranda, sensing this shift, grew more erratic. She micromanaged her direct reports, nitpicked over trivial matters, and issued curt defensive emails that only fueled further resentment among staff. One afternoon, during a leadership training session Danielle was facilitating, Miranda barged in unannounced. I'm not sure why we're wasting time on soft culture nonsense, she said loudly, interrupting the session. We should be focusing on quarterly profits. The room went silent. Eyes darted to Danielle. Without missing a beat, Danielle calmly turned toward her. Strong profits come from a strong culture, she said clearly. And the numbers already show that the changes we've implemented are improving both morale and performance. If you'd like to discuss the data, I'm happy to set up a meeting. Miranda's cheeks flushed. Without another word, she spun on her heel and left the room. The tension in the room broke as murmurs rippled through the group. A few managers exchanged glances and small smiles. Later that day, Thomas called Danielle into his side office. She's pushing harder because she knows the board is leaning toward the changes you're driving, he said. 2 days later, the board's final decision arrived. Danielle would officially take on an ongoing advisory role to the board, leading the culture transformation initiative for the entire firm. Her consulting team's contract would be extended and their scope expanded. A formal announcement was circulated company-wide. Danielle's name was on it front and center. By noon, her inbox was flooded with messages. Current employees sent congratulations. Former colleagues reached out to reconnect. Even a few former skeptics had now extended olive branches. But the most telling sign came the next morning. Miranda was absent from leadership meetings. Whispers spread quickly. By lunchtime, it was confirmed she had been placed on indefinite leave pending a leadership evaluation. Renee slipped into Danielle's office that afternoon, grinning. "Word is she's done," Renee said. "Board's had enough. You broke the dam, girl." Danielle allowed herself a small, quiet smile. It wasn't about personal revenge. It never had been. But seeing that old, toxic structure finally start to fall, that felt right. When she picked up Jordan that evening, he climbed into the car, chattering about his day. "Mama," he said suddenly, "remember when I had to come to your old job that one time, when that lady was mean?" Danielle glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "I remember." "Did you beat her?" he asked innocently. Danielle laughed. "With fists, baby. But I stood up. I used my voice. And a lot of people listened." Jordan grinned. "That's even better." As she drove home, Danielle felt something settle inside her, a sense of peace, of purpose. She hadn't just reclaimed her place in the industry. She had changed it, and she was far from finished. Over the next several weeks, the changes at Harrow and Leighton accelerated. Danielle's new advisory role gave her direct access to the board and broad authority to implement reforms. Where once leadership meetings had been rigid and performative, they were now marked by candid conversations. Her first major initiative was a new leadership development program, one that focused not just on profitability but on empathy, cultural competence, and ethical management. The goal was simple. No one would rise through the ranks without demonstrating the ability to lead people, not just projects. Danielle worked tirelessly, coordinating training modules, mentoring promising mid-level managers, and driving transparency initiatives. Her presence in the office was no longer a curiosity. It was a beacon. Employees who had been disengaged now leaned in. New ideas flowed freely. One morning, during a department check-in, a young black analyst named Mariah approached her. "Mayors Brooks," Mariah said quietly. "I just wanted to say, watching you do this, it means a lot, for people like me." Danielle smiled warmly. "Call me Danielle, and thank you. But remember, you have every right to be here, to lead here, too." Mariah nodded, eyes shining. "I will, thanks to you." Moments like that reminded Danielle why the fight mattered. Meanwhile, Miranda's indefinite leave stretched on. Rumors circulated that her contract would not be renewed. The power she once wielded through intimidation had evaporated. Her former allies distanced themselves. The firm's culture was transforming, slowly but surely. Client satisfaction began to rise again. Retention numbers improved. The board, seeing these early wins, grew more supportive of Danielle's vision. One afternoon, Thomas invited Danielle to lunch at a quiet downtown bistro. "You've done more in 2 months than most consultants do in a year," he told her over grilled salmon. "The board is already discussing making your role permanent, executive level." Danielle blinked. "Executive?" Thomas nodded. "Chief Culture and Operations Officer. You'd have full authority to keep driving this work." The weight of it settled on her shoulders. This was more than personal vindication. It was legacy work. "I need to think about it," she said. "But I'm honored." Thomas smiled. "You've earned every bit of it. And more." When Danielle returned to her office that afternoon, she found a bouquet of fresh flowers on her desk. No note, just a quiet acknowledgement, perhaps from an anonymous admirer of her work. That evening, as she prepared dinner for Jordan, she told him, "Mama might be getting a bigger job soon, one where I can help make the whole company better." Jordan grinned. "You already made it better, Mama." She laughed. "Well, there's always more work to do." But deep down she knew the firm was no longer the place that had once discarded her so casually. It was becoming a new place, one where voices like hers mattered, one where no mother would ever be punished for putting her child first. And the best part? This was just the beginning. 3 weeks later, Danielle stood before the Harrow and Leighton board once more, this time for her formal confirmation as the firm's new Chief Culture and Operations Officer. The vote had been unanimous. Even the holdouts had come around after seeing the numbers, the morale shift, and the revived client relationships. Danielle's leadership wasn't just making the company better, it was making it stronger. As the meeting adjourned, Robert Langston approached her with a firm handshake. "You've transformed this place, Ms. Brooks," he said. "We're fortunate to have you." Danielle smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Langston. I intend to keep pushing us forward." Word spread quickly. By midday, congratulatory emails flooded Danielle's inbox. Old colleagues from other firms called, some in awe, others inspired. One message stood out. A simple text from Renee. "From fired to the C-suite. You did it, sis." Danielle allowed herself a rare moment to simply sit back and breathe it in. But there was one more full circle moment to come. That Friday, Thomas invited her to a private lunch. "I want you to know," he said, "this isn't just about Harrow and Leighton. Other firms are watching. You're setting a new standard in the city. Don't be surprised when more doors open." Danielle smiled quietly. "That's good," she said, "because we still have a lot of work to do, for people like me and for the next generation." As she left the restaurant, her phone buzzed again. A message from HR. Miranda Wexler had officially resigned. Her reign at Harrow and Lady was over. Danielle stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, watching the midday traffic swirl by. Here she was, not just back, but on top. That evening at home, she told Jordan the news as he colored at the kitchen table. "Mama's got a new title now," she said. "Big new job." Jordan looked up with wide eyes. "Does that mean you're the boss of the mean lady?" Danielle laughed. "Well, the mean lady's gone now, and Mama's going to help make sure no one else acts like that again." Jordan beamed. "You're the best boss, Mama." She hugged him tight, emotions swelling in her chest, because that was what it had been about all along, not just proving herself, but proving to her son that dignity, strength, and justice mattered. That no one could take away your worth. And now, walking through the firm's gleaming halls, Danielle Brooks carried herself with quiet pride, not as the woman who had once been fired for bringing her son to work, but as the woman who had changed the game. For good. Dear friend, in workplaces across the world, so many talented individuals, especially working mothers and underrepresented voices, face unfair treatment, unseen struggles, and double standards. But change is possible. Stories like Danielle's remind us why standing up with dignity matters, and how one person can spark transformation for many. If this story moved you, please hit like. It helps us bring more powerful stories to light. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more inspiring, thought-provoking content. Together, we can raise awareness, shift mindsets, and build more just, compassionate workplaces for everyone. Thank you for watching.